Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Ted Nesbit of 8th District in Butler and Mercer counties. Before being elected as your representative in Harrisburg, I had spent about 10 years as a practicing attorney and also served as an assistant district attorney. That's why I was pleased to be chosen by the Speaker of the House to serve on the House Judiciary Committee. This committee considers legislation to improve public safety and the criminal justice system. Joining me today is the Executive Director, Tom Dymek. He's here to preview some of the issues the committee is expected to consider this session. So, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, if you could kind of explain a little bit about what your position is and what you do for the committee.
Sure. So each committee in the House has an executive director assigned to it, and that person is responsible for really coordinating the staff work that's required. So as the members come up with ideas for bills, ideas for different kinds of legislation or different things to do, we'll help actually craft those into the legal form that you need to use in order to potentially make that into law. And we'll also work with different interest groups, different stakeholders, different constituents even to help get different perspectives to share with the members as to what some of the changes are that are going on in the law. So I'm the executive director. I head up that for the Judiciary Committee, and we have a few other attorneys on staff who work with us in order to do that.
So a member would come up with some type of an idea for legislation, and you would then review it for whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, or what specifically would you look at that way?
It depends on what the member wants. There are times when a person has a fully formed idea, a really specific idea on what they want to do, and they'll bring it to us, and we may just be working through some of the technical details. But more often, it's that a member has some problem and they want to collaborate on trying to come up with some solutions to that problem. Maybe they heard it from a constituent, maybe they heard it from another member, maybe they just experienced it themselves. And we work with them to try to find where in the law we might be able to accommodate that and what kind of a solution might make sense. So that part's interesting in that we not only do the technical work, but get to talk about more of the ideas and the policy behind it.
Okay, and Judiciary is one of the most busy committees. Roughly how many bills do you expect that we'll look at this year?
We have, each year we get close to, but we don't quite get over 500 bills over to the committee. It's easily the busiest committee in the House of Representatives. We have more bills. We usually have probably about twice as many or 3 times as many bills as the next lower committee in terms of quantity of bills referred to it each session.
Now, for those out there, how is a bill referred to a committee? The leadership does that, but what are some of the things they look at before deciding where to put it in what committee?
Well, there are 23 standing committees in the House of Representatives, and when a bill is introduced, it might be amending a certain area of law, whatever the topic is. Let's say it's a crimes code bill, so it's addressing some kind of crime. Each of the committees has different subject matter that they cover. And one of those subjects for the Judiciary Committee would be the criminal code. So the Speaker of the House will get the bill as it's introduced and then decide which of the committees to refer it to. The state constitution requires that every bill be referred to a committee, so he has to refer it somewhere. But it's up to the Speaker's discretion on which committee that goes to. There are a fair number of bills that can go to multiple committees. So if, for example, there were a bill dealing with drug treatment for those convicted of certain drug offenses, that might go to Judiciary because of the criminal aspect. It might go to Human Services because of the drug treatment aspect of it. So that's part of the decision making that the Speaker does.
And my intention will be to cover a couple of the things that we're going to go over, but I guess we would start with one that's receiving a lot of attention and that I've attended the hearings on. It's a controversial issue, but at the same time a fascinating issue for me personally, is the medical marijuana bill. We've had a few hearings now, and I think we're going to have one more in Pittsburgh. But if you could kind of lay that issue out for folks and what is going on with the medical marijuana, because I think it's a little bit misunderstood.
It's a fascinating issue, and to your earlier point, we, the Judiciary Committee, have been holding a series of hearings, and those hearings have been done together with the Health Committee, because this is a type of bill that the subject matter just covers a whole lot of different areas and different areas of expertise. In terms of the medical aspect, what the Health Committee works with, in terms of the criminal aspect, with the current criminalization of all forms of marijuana, to it impacts even the banking industry and how that operates because of these businesses in other states being cash-only businesses and banks not participating, even making small business loans to set up medical marijuana businesses. So it's fascinating in the sprawl and all the different areas that the subject gets to. Medical marijuana, the topic there that the members have been talking about is, first we did a hearing on the medical aspects of it to really get some education as to what potential drawbacks or research there is as to the uses of medical marijuana. And the next hearing we had related to what are controls that, if there were legalization of medical marijuana, what kind of controls would we want to see in order to make sure that that product isn't diverted to the black market, isn't misused by children, it doesn't lead to workplace incidents or driving incidents, things like that. The next hearing that we'll have, which will be in Pittsburgh, will be regarding other states' experiences with medical marijuana, and those experiences have been varied. This has been done in 23 states in the District of Columbia and has been done in 24 different ways.
And you and I are both lawyers, so we can sometimes get too into the nitty-gritty. But I was surprised at the hearings to find out that because of the federal law, and marijuana is against the law in the federal system, that it's causing a lot of difficulties if we were to implement a legal form of it in the state system. If you could kind of describe the juxtaposition there between the two of those.
Sure. So marijuana remains a Schedule I substance under the Controlled Substances Act. What that means is, under federal law, it's illegal. You can't have marijuana, you can't possess it, you can't grow it, you can't use it. Federal crime if you do any of those things. Now what's odd is that you have states which have legalized certain kinds of medical use of marijuana and 2 states which have legalized recreational use of marijuana. Now, the obvious question is, how do you do that when that's still a federal crime? And that's where we're in this strange netherworld where the federal law enforcement folks aren't enforcing those federal crimes as in those states, at least as to the uses being done in those states, and at least as to now. But here are some of the ways that plays out practically. I mentioned banking. A bank, and there may be a handful of exceptions across the country, so I don't want to speak categorically, but my understanding is the vast majority of banks will not do any transactions that involved marijuana, even medical marijuana, because so long as that remains a federal crime, they are, in essence, laundering drug money when they do that, and it threatens their banking charter and threatens their ability to do any business whatsoever. Another example is doctors. Some people say, why not just allow doctors to prescribe marijuana same way you do every other drug? Why can't I just pick it up at CVS the same way I pick up every other drug that I might be prescribed by my doctor with regard to my ailments? Well, one of the reasons is that doctor has a license from the federal government which gives prescribing authority. And if that doctor is going to start prescribing something that is a Schedule I banned substance under federal law, they have the possibility of losing their federal prescribing license, their DEA license, which impacts their ability to help anybody in terms of providing services.
Yeah, and this is in the spot that I will say, I started out generally opposed to this. I've switched to now I'm open to deciding, and I don't have a strong opinion as to which way I'm going to go yet. And I would encourage any of my constituents that have a strong opinion about this issue, please contact me and help me decide what would be the best for the constituents in my area, because it is a tough issue. Especially we had testimony from parents of children that are having seizures and believe that medical marijuana helped them. And you've heard all the testimony, and then you have the doctors in the medical community that have said we haven't had enough testing. So it's a difficult issue, and I don't have a good feel for where the constituents in my area are either. I've seen some polling data, and I don't think that I need to get in the habit of making decisions based on polls, but it is important that I get some feedback from my constituents, and so I'm asking anybody that's watching that has a strong opinion to please contact my office either by email or otherwise and let me know where you are on that. Other issues other than medical marijuana that gets getting a lot of the attention. What are some of the other things that we're going to be looking at in the Judiciary Committee this year?
As you might expect, given that we have so many bills and we have so much activity, we have a wide range of issues. So just to tick off a few of them off the top of my head, there's been a lot of talk about the death penalty in Pennsylvania, whether it's appropriate and under what circumstances it's appropriate, what kind of reforms can be made to the law so that the capital cases don't linger for decades and decades with appeals, that if somebody is truly guilty, that the punishment that's decided by a jury and by the courts be carried out. So that's one issue that's out there. We deal with, there's been a lot in the news recently about certain investigations of the Attorney General. And it used to be there was a statute that authorized an independent counsel who would be able to investigate the Attorney General if there were any kind of allegations of criminal conduct. So there's been some talk about reauthorizing an independent counsel. That old law had expired and was never reenacted, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And so there's been talk about possibly revisiting that subject. There are certain areas of the law that the committee tends to return to session after session and make smaller adjustments, but in a way to try and help people. So for example, we're working on some ways to help victims of crime receive more compensation for the harms that they had suffered from the people who had done it. So somebody who was the victim of a robbery receiving restitution, receiving compensation for what was taken from them, or somebody who was hurt receiving compensation from the perpetrator for their medical expenses, things like that. So we're working on areas there. And
how about some of the civil areas as opposed to, because I think some people just think judiciary, criminal laws, but
right.
Also the court system has a lot to do with divorce code, custody, civil procedures. I know we just did an arbitration through
right.
the committee that modified some of the existing arbitration laws. So anything exciting on that side?
That's right. A lot. We'll get into issues regarding the divorce period, the waiting period for divorces. Right now, there's a 2-year waiting period before somebody can pursue a divorce, and there's some talk about whether that creates animosity and creates strain on families, creates strain on children that shouldn't necessarily be there. So we're going to be looking at that.
And that is one of the bills that I co-sponsored because of those concerns. It's not that I want to encourage divorce, but I do believe that we need to examine whether that's actually creating more of a problem especially in my mind for the kids, because the parents haven't resolved the marital property issues, so it is affecting the children. So, but we're going to have, we may have hearings on that, or
expect we will be having hearings on that in the future, so we can really look at that issue of whether it is something that promotes divorce or whether it's something that, on the contrary, helps children and doesn't impact divorce rates in any negative way. So, and that's something that these hearings are useful for trying to develop facts like that, so folks can make educated decisions about what they want to do. So that's one area. There are other areas of family law that we'll address as well. We mentioned the Arbitration Act, and arbitration is an alternative to going to court in the first place that's usually less expensive, faster, and leads to a quick resolution one way or the other. Pennsylvania has long had arbitrations, but this was an update to the law to bring it up to speed. I think the last update was some 20 or more years ago. So this is an update that we're working on there. And in terms of civil areas, we get into spots that can be fairly boring, but they're very important once you have to deal with it. For example, changes to the power of attorney law and making sure that where somebody is providing a power of attorney to, let's say it's a elderly father or mother to their child to help them their adult child to help take care of certain of their finances or things like that. We want to make sure that it's done in a way that has enough protections for the principal, the elderly person giving the power of attorney, but also enables them to do the things that they want to do.
So it's a wide-ranging things, which was one of the reasons that I did ask to be on the committee. So I appreciate you coming on here. What you and I find fascinating, I'm not sure if everybody else does. So anyhow, but I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for your time. And that's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Ted Nesbit, and if you need any assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office or through my website. That information will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.